The rain was falling in sheets over Fort Benning, Georgia, on that cold November morning when Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson received the news that would change everything. He stood at the window of his small office, watching the water cascade down the glass, thinking about the deployment that awaited him and his team in just 48 hours. Afghanistan. Another tour. Another chance to serve his country, and another chance to leave behind everyone he loved. Marcus was 42 years old, a career soldier with 23 years of service behind him. His face bore the weathered lines of a man who had seen too much, who had carried burdens that most people could never understand. His dark eyes, once bright with the idealism of youth, now held a depth that spoke of losses both witnessed and endured. He had buried friends. He had written letters to widows. He had held dying men in his arms and promised them that everything would be okay, knowing full well that nothing would ever be okay again. But today, something felt different. There was a weight in his chest that he couldn't quite explain, a premonition that this deployment would be unlike any other. He dismissed the feeling as pre-mission anxiety, something every soldier experienced but rarely admitted. He turned away from the window and began reviewing the mission briefing one more time. His team consisted of 5 Rangers, each one handpicked for their skills and reliability. There was Staff Sergeant Derek Williams, his second-in-command, a 35-year-old father of 3 from Birmingham, Alabama. Derek was the kind of man who could diffuse tension with a joke and inspire courage with a look. He'd saved Marcus's life twice during their previous deployments, and Marcus trusted him more than he trusted himself. Then there was Sergeant First Class Antonio Reyes, a 38-year-old communications specialist from San Antonio, Texas. Antonio was quiet, methodical, and possessed an almost supernatural ability to stay calm under fire. He was also a devout Catholic who attended Mass every Sunday without fail, a fact that had earned him the affectionate nickname Father Tony among his teammates. Sergeant James Jimmy O'Brien was the youngest of the group at 28, a demolitions expert from Boston who had joined the army to escape the streets that had claimed his older brother. Jimmy was loud, brash, and fiercely loyal. He covered his insecurities with humor and his fears with bravado, but underneath all of that was a young man desperately seeking the family he had never really had. Staff Sergeant Michael Chen was the team's medic, a 33-year-old second-generation Chinese-American from Seattle. Michael had originally planned to become a doctor, but the events of September 11th had changed his trajectory. He had enlisted the day after watching the towers fall, determined to do something meaningful with his life. His medical skills had saved countless lives over the years, but the weight of those he couldn't save haunted him in the quiet moments. Finally, there was Sergeant David Foster, a 31-year-old sniper from rural Montana. David was a man of few words, preferring to let his actions speak for him. He had grown up hunting elk in the mountains, and that patience and precision had translated perfectly to his role as the team's overwatch. He was the one they all counted on to see what others missed, to protect them from threats they never even knew existed. Together, these 6 men formed a unit that functioned like a single organism. They had trained together, bled together, and mourned together. They were more than teammates. They were brothers in every way that mattered. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support helps us create more content like this, and it means the world to us. Now, let's continue with our story. The deployment began, as most deployments do, with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The flight to Afghanistan was long and uncomfortable, but the men passed the time as they always did, sharing stories, playing cards, and making inappropriate jokes that would have scandalized polite company. It was their way of coping, their way of pushing back against the darkness that awaited them. They landed at Bagram Air Base under cover of night, the familiar smell of dust and diesel fuel filling their lungs as they stepped off the aircraft. Marcus had been here before, many times, but the landscape always managed to feel both familiar and foreign at the same time. The mountains loomed in the distance, ancient and indifferent to the conflicts that had raged across their slopes for centuries. Their mission was straightforward on paper, but complex in execution. Intelligence had identified a network of insurgent safe houses in a remote village in Kunar province, and Marcus's team had been tasked with gathering information and, if necessary, neutralizing any threats they encountered. It was the kind of mission they had completed dozens of times before, the kind of mission that had become almost routine. Almost. They spent 3 days at Bagram, preparing their equipment and reviewing the intelligence reports. Marcus studied the maps until he could close his eyes and see every road, every building, every potential ambush point. He planned their routes, identified extraction points, and ran through every possible scenario in his mind. He was thorough, because thoroughness kept men alive. On the 4th day, they loaded into their vehicles and began the journey north. The convoy moved slowly through the rugged terrain, the soldiers maintaining constant vigilance for any sign of threat. The Afghan countryside scrolled past their windows, a harsh and beautiful landscape that seemed to exist outside of time. Farmers worked in their fields, children played in the dust, and life continued as it had for thousands of years, despite the presence of foreign soldiers and the violence that seemed to lurk around every corner. They reached the village just before sunset, the sky painted in brilliant shades of orange and purple that seemed almost too beautiful for a place so scarred by conflict. The village itself was small, perhaps 200 residents, clustered around a central market square that had seen better days. The buildings were made of mud and stone, their walls pockmarked with bullet holes from battles long past. Marcus called for a halt at the edge of the village, and the team dismounted to assess the situation. The streets were unusually empty for this time of day, and that immediately set his instincts on alert. In his experience, empty streets meant one of two things. Either the residents were hiding from something, or they had been warned to stay away. Neither possibility was comforting. "Something's not right," Derek muttered, his eyes scanning the rooftops and windows. "It's too quiet." Marcus nodded, feeling the same unease settling into his bones. "Stay sharp. We stick to the plan, but we adapt as needed. Tony, I want you monitoring all frequencies. Jimmy, David, watch our flanks. Michael, stay close to me. Derek, take point." The team moved into the village with practiced precision, their weapons at the ready, their senses heightened to catch any sign of danger. They passed through the narrow streets, checking corners, clearing doorways, but finding nothing. The village appeared to be abandoned, or at least its residents were doing an excellent job of pretending it was. They reached the first target location, a small house on the eastern edge of the village that intelligence had identified as a potential weapons cache. Derek positioned himself at the door, while the rest of the team took up defensive positions around the building. Marcus gave the signal, and Derek kicked in the door, disappearing inside with Marcus right behind him. The house was empty. No weapons, no insurgents, no sign that anyone had been there in days. The same story repeated itself at the second and third target locations. Nothing. It was as if the intelligence had been completely wrong, or as if someone had warned the insurgents that they were coming. "This doesn't make sense," Antonio said as they regrouped near the market square. "The intel was solid. Multiple sources confirmed the activity here." Marcus frowned, his mind racing through the possibilities. Maybe they moved. Maybe they knew we were coming. Either way, we need to do a thorough sweep of the entire village before we call it a bust. It was then, as the last light of day faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge overhead, that they heard it. A small voice, barely more than a whisper, coming from somewhere in the shadows to their right. "Please help me." The team immediately turned toward the sound, their weapons raised, their hearts pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and apprehension. In the gathering darkness, it was difficult to see anything clearly, but Marcus could make out a small figure huddled against the wall of a nearby building. "Hold your fire," he commanded, his voice low but firm. "Michael, light." Michael produced a flashlight and directed the beam toward the figure, revealing a sight that made every man in the team catch his breath. It was a girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, dressed in tattered clothing that hung loosely on her thin frame. Her face was dirty, her hair matted and tangled, but her eyes were what captured their attention. They were large and dark, filled with a fear that seemed too profound for someone so young. Marcus lowered his weapon and approached the girl slowly, not wanting to frighten her any more than she already was. He had seen children in war zones before, had witnessed the devastating effects of conflict on the youngest and most innocent, but something about this girl struck him differently. There was an intelligence in her eyes, a determination that seemed at odds with her vulnerable appearance. "It's okay," he said softly, kneeling down to her level. "We're not going to hurt you. Do you speak English?" The girl nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "My name is Amira," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "You have to help me, please. My family." "Where is your family, Amira?" The girl pointed toward a building on the opposite side of the square, a larger structure that appeared to be some kind of community center or meeting hall. "In there! But please, you can't go inside. It's dangerous." Marcus exchanged a look with Derek, both men thinking the same thing. This could be a trap. Children had been used before to lure soldiers into ambushes, and the empty village, the failed intelligence, everything pointed towards something sinister. But looking into Amira's eyes, Marcus saw only genuine fear. Whatever was happening here, this child was not part of any conspiracy. She was just a little girl, caught in circumstances beyond her control, desperate for someone to help her. "What kind of danger?" Marcus asked gently. "Who is in that building?" Amira's lower lip trembled, and tears began to stream down her dirty cheeks. "Bad men. They came 3 days ago. They took everyone. My mother, my father, my brother. They put them all inside. They said anyone who tries to leave will die. They said anyone who tries to help will die too." The pieces began to fall into place in Marcus's mind. The empty streets, the failed intelligence, the absence of any insurgent activity. The insurgents hadn't fled. They had consolidated. They had taken the entire village hostage, using the residents as human shields while they waited for something. But what? "How many bad men?" Derek asked, his tactical mind already working through the variables. Amira held up both hands, then closed them and opened them again. "Many, maybe 20, maybe more. They have big guns. They have things that go boom." "Explosives," Jimmy muttered under his breath. "This just keeps getting better." Marcus stood and stepped away from the girl, motioning for his team to huddle up. They needed to assess the situation and come up with a plan, but they also needed to do it quickly. If the insurgents became aware of their presence, the hostages' lives could be forfeit. "Here's what we know," Marcus said quietly. "We've got approximately 20 hostiles holding what sounds like most of the village population inside that building. They're armed and potentially rigged with explosives. We've got 6 operators and no backup for at least 3 hours. We could pull back, call for reinforcements," Antonio suggested, though his tone indicated he already knew what the answer would be. Marcus shook his head. 3 hours is too long. If they realize we're here, or if whatever they're waiting for happens before reinforcements arrive, those hostages are dead. We need to act now. "With respect, Sergeant," Michael said carefully, 6 against 20 with hostages in the mix. The odds aren't exactly in our favor." "I know the odds," Marcus replied, "but I also know that there are families in that building. Mothers, fathers, children. People who did nothing wrong except live in the wrong place at the wrong time. If we leave them, they die. It's that simple." David, who had been silent until now, spoke up for the first time. I can find a position with Overwatch. I'll take out as many as I can before they even know we're there. That evens the odds considerably. Good. Jimmy, what do we have in terms of flashbangs and smoke grenades? Jimmy did a quick inventory. 6 flashbangs, 4 smoke. It's not much, but it's enough to create some chaos. Marcus nodded, a plan beginning to form in his mind. All right, here's what we're going to do. David, find your position. You've got 10 minutes to get set up. Antonio, I want you to maintain communication with command. Let them know the situation and that we're moving on the objective. The rest of us will approach from multiple entry points. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we get those hostages out. Any questions? There were none. The men understood the risks, accepted them, and prepared to do what they had trained their entire careers to do. They dispersed to their positions, leaving Marcus alone with Amira. The little girl looked up at him with those impossibly large eyes, and Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. This child, this stranger in a foreign land, had reached out to them for help. She had trusted them to do the right thing, to save her family, to make everything okay again. And Marcus was determined not to let her down. Amira, he said, kneeling down to her level once more, I need you to stay hidden until this is over. Can you find a safe place to hide? Amira shook her head vigorously. No, I need to come with you. I need to help. It's too dangerous. You could get hurt. I know where the bad men are standing. I know which rooms my family is in. I can help you. Marcus hesitated. Everything in his training told him to refuse, to keep this child far from the danger that awaited them. But there was something in Amira's voice, a certainty that gave him pause. She had spent 3 days watching these men, learning their patterns, memorizing their positions. She had information that could mean the difference between success and failure, between life and death. If I let you help, he said finally, you have to promise me that you'll do exactly what I say when I say it. No arguments, no hesitation. Can you promise me that? Amira nodded solemnly. I promise. Marcus took a deep breath and stood. All right then, stay close to me and stay quiet. We're going to get your family back. They moved through the darkness, making their way toward the building where the hostages were being held. Marcus kept Amira close, his body positioned between her and any potential threat. As they approached, he could see light flickering through the windows, could hear the distant murmur of voices speaking in a language he didn't understand. David's voice came through his earpiece, calm and steady. In position. I count 18 hostiles visible through the windows, 6 on the ground floor, 12 on the second. Most of the hostages appear to be in a large room on the west side of the building. Copy that, Marcus replied. Hold for my signal. They reached the rear of the building, where a small door offered entry away from the main entrance. Marcus examined the door carefully, looking for any signs of booby traps or alarms. Finding none, he motioned for the team to stack up. Amira, he whispered, this is where it gets dangerous. I need you to stay right here behind this wall until I come back for you. Do you understand? But Amira tugged at his sleeve, her eyes wide with urgency. Wait before you go inside. There is something you need to know. Marcus paused, his hand on the door handle. What is it? The room at the end of the hallway on the ground floor, the one with the red door. Don't open that door. Marcus frowned. Why not? What's behind that door? Amira's face went pale, and her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I don't know exactly, but the bad men are scared of it too. They never go inside. They guard it, but they never open it. One of them said it was their insurance policy. He said if anyone tries to rescue us, they'll use what's inside to kill everyone. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. An insurance policy. That could mean anything, but in his experience it usually meant something catastrophic. A bomb large enough to level the entire building. Chemical or biological agents. something designed to ensure that if the insurgents couldn't win, no one would survive. Thank you, Amira. That's very important information. Now please, stay here and stay hidden. This time, the girl obeyed, pressing herself against the wall and making herself as small as possible. Marcus turned back to his team, his mind racing with this new complication. You all heard that. There's a room with a red door on the ground floor. We avoid it at all costs until we've secured the hostages and neutralized the hostiles. Then we figure out what we're dealing with. The men nodded their understanding, and Marcus gave the signal to proceed. Derek kicked in the door, and they flowed into the building like shadows, their movements silent and precise. The first hostile they encountered never even saw them coming. Derek took him down with a single shot, the suppressed weapon making barely more noise than a whisper. They moved through the ground floor methodically, clearing each room, neutralizing each threat with cold efficiency. Above them, they could hear movement as the insurgents on the second floor began to realize something was wrong. Shouts echoed through the building, followed by the sound of running feet and the clatter of weapons being readied. "David now," Marcus commanded. From his position outside, David began to fire. His shots were measured and precise, each one finding its mark through the windows of the second floor. The sound of breaking glass mingled with the cries of the wounded, as the sniper's deadly accuracy thinned the ranks of the hostiles. Marcus led his team up the stairs, flashbangs leading the way. The disorienting blasts bought them precious seconds, allowing them to engage the remaining insurgents before they could recover. The firefight was intense but brief, the Rangers' superior training and coordination overwhelming the disorganized resistance. Within minutes, it was over. 18 insurgents lay dead or dying, and the team had sustained no casualties. Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of relief before refocusing on the mission. "Clear the hostage room," he ordered. "Michael, be ready. They may need medical attention." Derek moved to the door of the room where the hostages were being held. It was locked from the outside, a heavy padlock securing it in place. Jimmy stepped forward with his bolt cutters and made quick work of the lock, the metal falling away with a clatter. The door swung open to reveal a scene that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. The room was packed with people, perhaps 70 or 80 villagers of all ages, crammed into a space designed for no more than 20. They huddled together in the darkness, their eyes wide with terror, their bodies pressed against one another for comfort and warmth. For a long moment no one moved. The hostages stared at the soldiers with a mixture of fear and hope, unable to believe that their ordeal might finally be over. Then a woman near the front of the crowd began to cry, great heaving sobs that seemed to break something loose in the room. Others joined her, the tension of the past 3 days releasing in a flood of tears and embraces. "It's over," Marcus said, his voice carrying through the room. "You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here." Michael moved through the crowd, checking for injuries, providing comfort where he could. Most of the hostages were suffering from dehydration and exhaustion, but there were no serious injuries. It was a small miracle, one that Marcus was grateful for. As the villagers began to file out of the room, Marcus found himself face to face with a man who appeared to be in his early 50s. His face was weathered and weary, but his eyes held a dignity that the circumstances had not managed to diminish. "You are the leader?" the man asked in accented but clear English. "I am, Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson, United States Army Rangers." The man extended his hand. "I am Hashem Nazari, the elder of this village. My family and I owe you our lives." Marcus shook the man's hand firmly. "We were just doing our job, sir. I'm glad we were able to help." Hashem's expression grew troubled. "There is something you must know. The men who held us, they were planning something terrible. They spoke of it when they thought we could not hear or understand. They have a bomb, a device that they brought with them. They called it their guarantee that their mission would not fail." The red door. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Do you know where this device is? Hashem nodded slowly. In the room at the end of the hallway, the one with the red door. They never let anyone near it. Even their own men were afraid to go inside. Marcus turned to his team. We need to deal with this before we can evacuate. Derek, take the hostages out through the back. Get them as far from this building as possible. Antonio, contact command and let them know we may have an explosive device. Jimmy, you're with me. Marcus, Derek said, his voice tight with concern, you don't know what's in there. Let EOD handle it. That's what they're trained for. EOD is 3 hours away minimum. If that device is on a timer, or if there's a remote trigger somewhere, we don't have that kind of time. We need to at least assess the situation. Derek clearly wanted to argue further, but he knew better than to waste precious seconds on a battle he wouldn't win. He nodded once and began herding the hostages toward the exit, leaving Marcus and Jimmy standing in the hallway, staring at the red door. It looked so ordinary, that door. Just wood and paint, a simple barrier between them and whatever lay beyond. But Marcus had seen enough in his years of service to know that the most dangerous things often came in the most unassuming packages. Jimmy, what do you think we're dealing with? The demolitions expert studied the door carefully, looking for any wires or triggers that might indicate a trap. Hard to say without seeing it. Could be anything from a simple IED to something a lot more sophisticated. The fact that they were keeping it separate from everything else suggests it's something significant. Significant enough to level this building? Jimmy's silence was answer enough. Marcus reached for the door handle, then stopped. He remembered Amira's words, her warning not to open that door. But he also remembered the fear in Hashem's eyes, the way the man had spoken about the device, and he knew that leaving it unattended was not an option. He had just begun to turn the handle when a small voice cut through the darkness behind him. I told you not to open that door. Marcus whirled around to find Amira standing in the hallway, her small figure barely visible in the dim light. His heart lurched with a mixture of relief that she was okay and frustration that she hadn't stayed where he had told her. Amira, you shouldn't be here. I told you to stay hidden. I know, but I had to tell you something I forgot before. Marcus knelt down, bringing himself to her level. What is it? What did you forget? Amira's eyes were fixed on the red door, and there was something in her expression that Marcus couldn't quite read. One of the bad men, the one who seemed to be in charge, he said something before they put us in that room. He said the door was special. He said it had a surprise for anyone who tried to open it from the outside. Jimmy cursed under his breath. A booby trap. Of course there's a booby trap. Marcus felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They couldn't leave the building without neutralizing the threat, but they couldn't neutralize the threat without opening the door, and opening the door could trigger an explosion that would kill them all. Is there another way in? He asked, more to himself than to anyone else. Amira tilted her head thoughtfully. There is a window on the outside of the building. It goes into the same room. Marcus's hope surged. Can you show me? The little girl nodded and led them back outside, around the perimeter of the building to a small window set high on the wall. It was barely large enough for a man to fit through, but it might just be their only option. Jimmy, can you tell anything from here? Jimmy examined the window carefully, using his flashlight to illuminate the interior of the room beyond. What he saw made his face go pale. Marcus, we've got a problem, a big problem. Marcus looked through the window and his heart sank. The room was filled with barrels, dozens of them, stacked against the walls and piled in the center of the floor. And connected to those barrels was a web of wires and blinking lights that could only mean one thing. That's not just a bomb, Jimmy said, his voice strained. That's enough explosive material to take out half the village. Maybe more. Marcus stared at the device, his mind racing through their options. They couldn't leave it. They couldn't safely defuse it without specialized equipment, and they couldn't be sure that moving the hostages would get them far enough away to survive the blast. "How long do we have?" Jimmy studied the blinking lights, his expert eyes reading the patterns. "There's a timer. I can see the display from here. We've got about 40 minutes. 40 minutes, not enough time for EOD to arrive. Barely enough time to evacuate the village to a safe distance, but it was something. It was a chance. All right, here's what we're going to do. Jimmy, I need you to find a way to extend that timer or disarm the device entirely. Use the window if you have to, but do not open that door. I'm going to help with the evacuation. If you can't stop it, you get out and you run. That's an order." Jimmy nodded grimly. "Understood." Marcus turned to Amira. "I need you to come with me. We're going to get everyone away from here." "What about my family? Are they safe?" "They're being taken out right now. Derek is making sure everyone gets to safety, but I need you to help me. Some of the older villagers might not understand English, and I need someone to help me communicate with them." Amira squared her small shoulders with a determination that seemed incongruous with her size. "I will help." They moved quickly through the village, Marcus coordinating the evacuation while Amira translated his instructions into Pashto. The villagers were frightened and confused, but they followed directions, streaming out of the village toward the relative safety of the hills beyond. Marcus found Derek at the edge of the village, overseeing the exodus with his typical efficiency. "How are we looking?" "Almost everyone is out. A few stragglers, but we should have the village clear within 20 minutes. That gives us some margin, but not much. Jimmy's working on the device, but I'm not optimistic." Derek's jaw tightened. "Then we need to move faster. I'll sweep the remaining buildings, make sure no one got left behind." As Derek disappeared back into the village, Marcus felt a tug on his sleeve. He looked down to find Amira staring up at him with those impossibly earnest eyes. "There is something I need to tell you," she said. "Something important." Marcus knelt down. "What is it?" "The bad men. They talked about why they came here. They said they were waiting for something, someone, a man they called the American. They said when the American arrived, everything would change." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Did they say anything else about this American? What he looked like when he was supposed to arrive? Amira shook her head. "They just said he was important, that he was bringing something they needed. They said after he came, they wouldn't need the bomb anymore. A traitor. There was an American working with the insurgents, someone who was bringing them something valuable enough to warrant this elaborate operation. The hostages, the bomb, the empty village. It had all been a setup, a trap designed to buy time until this mysterious American could complete his mission. But who, and what could he possibly be bringing that was worth all of this?" Marcus's radio crackled to life. "Sergeant, this is David. I've got eyes on a vehicle approaching from the north. Looks like a civilian truck, but it's moving fast and heading straight for the village." "Copy that. Hold your position and keep eyes on. Do not engage unless I give the order." Marcus turned to Amira. "I need you to go with the others now. Find your family and stay with them. Can you do that for me?" The little girl looked reluctant, but she nodded. "Be careful," she said, and then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd of villagers making their way to safety. Marcus moved to intercept the approaching vehicle, his weapon at the ready. The truck came to a stop at the edge of the village, and a single figure emerged from the driver's side. In the darkness, it was impossible to make out any features, but Marcus could tell it was a man, moving with the confident stride of someone who expected to be welcomed. "That's far enough," Marcus called out. "Identify yourself." The man stopped, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender that somehow managed to look mocking. "Easy, soldier. I'm on your side." The voice was American. East Coast from the sound of it, educated and smooth. Marcus kept his weapon trained on the figure as he approached, his every instinct screaming that something was very wrong. I said, identify yourself, name and purpose. The man stepped forward into the light, and Marcus found himself looking at a face that was vaguely familiar. He was in his late 40s, with the kind of polished appearance that spoke of expensive suits and corner offices. His smile was practiced, politician smooth, and utterly devoid of warmth. My name is Richard Hayes. I work for the State Department, Special Attaché to the Secretary. I'm here to negotiate the release of the hostages. Marcus didn't lower his weapon. The hostages have already been released. We neutralized the insurgents approximately 30 minutes ago. Something flickered across Hayes's face, too quick to identify but unsettling nonetheless. I see. That's excellent news. The Secretary will be pleased. But if the situation has been resolved, why are all these people evacuating? There's an explosive device in the village. We're clearing the area as a precaution. Again that flicker. How unfortunate. Is there anything I can do to help? Marcus studied the man carefully. Something about his story didn't add up. State Department negotiators didn't arrive alone in civilian vehicles. They came with security details and official escorts, and they certainly didn't arrive after the crisis had already been resolved. How did you know about this situation, Mr. Hayes? The assault on this village wasn't public knowledge. Hayes's smile never wavered. I have access to certain intelligence channels, Sergeant. It's part of my job. When I heard about the hostage situation, I immediately mobilized to assist. Mobilized from where? Kabul. I've been stationed there for the past 3 months. Marcus's radio crackled again. Sergeant, this is Antonio. Command has no record of a Richard Hayes attached to the State Department in this region. They're advising extreme caution. Marcus felt his finger tighten on the trigger. Interesting, because my command tells me that no one by your name is currently working for the State Department in Afghanistan. For a long moment, Hayes said nothing. The smile slowly faded from his face, replaced by an expression that was cold and calculating. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its practiced warmth. You're smarter than you look, Sergeant. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. They did send their best, after all. Who are you, really? And what are you doing here? Hayes reached slowly into his jacket, and Marcus's entire body tensed. But instead of a weapon, the man produced a small device about the size of a cell phone. You want to know who I am? I'm the man who's going to change the world, Sergeant, and you and your little band of heroes have just become very inconvenient. He pressed a button on the device, and Marcus heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was the sound of his radio being jammed, followed by the distant rumble of an explosion from somewhere in the village. Marcus didn't hesitate. He fired, but Hayes was already moving, diving behind his truck with a speed that belied his refined appearance. The bullet struck metal instead of flesh, and suddenly Marcus found himself in a firefight he hadn't anticipated. More figures emerged from the darkness, men with weapons and the unmistakable bearing of trained professionals. These weren't insurgents. They were something else entirely, something far more dangerous. Marcus fell back, using the buildings for cover as he tried to assess the situation. He was outnumbered and outgunned, his communications were jammed, and somewhere behind him, an explosive device was counting down to detonation. "Derek, David, anyone respond!" Nothing but static. He moved through the village, making his way back toward the building with the red door. If Jimmy had succeeded in disarming the device, they might still have a chance. If not, he pushed the thought away and kept moving. The building came into view, and Marcus's heart lurched. The window through which Jimmy had been working was shattered, and smoke was pouring from the opening. He sprinted toward the structure, his worst fears playing out in his mind. He found Jimmy lying on the ground beneath the window, his face pale and his breathing shallow. The demolitions expert had been thrown clear by some kind of secondary explosion, and from the awkward angle of his left arm, it was clear he was badly injured. "Jimmy, talk to me!" Jimmy's eyes fluttered open and he managed a weak smile. "Hey, Sarge, guess I found the booby trap." "The device, did you disarm it?" Jimmy shook his head weakly. "Couldn't get to it in time. Secondary charge went off when I tried to cut the main wire. I'm sorry, Marcus, I couldn't stop it." Marcus looked at his watch. Less than 20 minutes remained. "Can you move?" "I don't think so. Something's wrong with my legs. I can't feel them." The worst possible news. Jimmy's spine might be damaged, and moving him without proper equipment could cause permanent paralysis or death. But leaving him here wasn't an option either. "I'm going to carry you. It might hurt, but I need to get you away from here." "Marcus, the timer, it's been accelerated. That guy in the suit, he must have had a remote trigger. We've got maybe 5 minutes, tops." 5 minutes. Marcus looked toward the hills where the villagers had fled. They were far enough away now. The evacuation had bought them the distance they needed to survive. But his team was still scattered throughout the village, cut off and unaware of the accelerated timeline. He made the hardest decision of his life. "I'm sorry, Jimmy, I have to find the others." Jimmy nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Go. I knew what I signed up for." "No." Marcus's jaw set with determination. "No one gets left behind. Michael, Derek, anyone." From somewhere in the darkness he heard a response. "Marcus, over here." It was Derek's voice, coming from somewhere to his left. Marcus scooped Jimmy into his arms, ignoring the younger man's cry of pain, and moved toward the sound. He found Derek and Michael pinned down behind a low wall, exchanging fire with Hayes's men. David was nowhere to be seen, but Marcus could hear the crack of his sniper rifle from somewhere in the distance, providing what cover he could. "We need to move now," Marcus shouted over the gunfire. "The bomb's going to blow in less than 5 minutes." Derek's eyes widened with understanding. He and Michael laid down suppressing fire while Marcus carried Jimmy toward them. Together, the 4 men began a fighting retreat toward the edge of the village, with David's sniper fire keeping the enemy at bay. They had almost reached safety when Marcus heard a sound that would haunt him forever. It was Hayes's voice, amplified by some kind of speaker, cutting through the chaos of battle. "You think you've won, Sergeant? You think you've saved these people? Look behind you." Marcus turned and his heart stopped. Standing at the edge of the village, surrounded by Hayes's men, was Amira, the little girl who had trusted them, who had helped them save her family, was now being used as a human shield. "You have a choice to make, Sergeant. You can run and save yourselves, or you can try to save this child, but you can't do both, not in the time you have left." Marcus looked at his team, at Jimmy bleeding in his arms, at the timer counting down in his mind. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to run, to save the men who had fought beside him, to survive so he could fight another day. But he couldn't. He couldn't leave that little girl to die, not after everything she had done, not after the trust she had placed in them. He couldn't live with himself if he walked away now. "Take Jimmy and go," he said to Derek. "Get as far away as you can." "Marcus, you can't." "That's an order, Staff Sergeant. Get our people to safety. I'll catch up." He didn't wait for a response. He was already moving toward Amira, his weapon raised, his mind calculating angles and distances and odds that were impossibly stacked against him. Hayes laughed, a cold and mirthless sound. "Heroic to the end. I almost admire it." "Let her go. This is between you and me." "Is it? I think it's about something much bigger than either of us, Sergeant. It's about the future, about power, about who gets to decide what happens next in this part of the world." "I don't care about your politics. Let the girl go and we can talk." Hayes seemed to consider this for a moment. Then slowly he released Amira, pushing her forward. The little girl stumbled but didn't fall, her eyes finding Marcus's across the distance that separated them. "Run," Marcus mouthed. "Run and don't look back." Amira ran. She ran like her life depended on it, because it did. Marcus watched her disappear into the darkness, heading toward her family, towards safety. And then he turned back to face Hayes. "Satisfied?" Hayes asked. "The child is safe. Now what?" Marcus's answer was cut short by the sound of the explosion. The building with the red door erupted in a massive fireball, the force of the blast knocking everyone to the ground. Marcus felt the heat wash over him, felt debris raining down around him, felt the world shake with the violence of the detonation. When the dust began to settle, Marcus pushed himself to his feet. His ears were ringing, his vision blurred, but he was alive. He looked around for Hayes, but the man and his team had vanished, likely using the chaos of the explosion as cover for their escape. In the distance, he could see the villagers, still safe in the hills. The evacuation had worked. They had gotten everyone far enough away to survive the blast, and somewhere among them was Amira, reunited with her family. Marcus stumbled toward his team, finding them battered but alive at the edge of the village. Derek was supporting Jimmy, whose injuries were stabilized thanks to Michael's quick work. David emerged from his sniper position, limping but intact. "Everyone okay?" Marcus asked, his voice rough with smoke and exhaustion. "We're alive," Derek replied, "which is more than I expected 10 minutes ago." "Hayes, gone, disappeared in the explosion. We've got no idea where he went or who he was really working for." Marcus nodded slowly, his mind already turning to the questions that would need to be answered. Who was Richard Hayes, really? What had he been bringing to the insurgents? And what had this all been about? But those questions could wait. Right now, all that mattered was that his team was alive, the hostages were safe, and a little girl named Amira had played a crucial role in making it all possible. As the sun began to rise over the Afghan mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Marcus gathered his team and began the long walk toward the villagers' camp. There would be evacuations to coordinate, reports to file, and a mystery to unravel. But for now, in this moment, he allowed himself to feel something he rarely permitted: pride. They had done something good here. Despite the odds, despite the betrayal, despite everything that had gone wrong, they had saved lives. And that, in the end, was what being a soldier was all about. The village elder, Hashem, met them at the edge of the camp. His face was grave, but his eyes were warm as he gripped Marcus's hand. "My people owe you a debt that can never be repaid," he said. "You risked everything to save us. That is not something we will forget." "Your village helped us too," Marcus replied, "especially Amira. That little girl is braver than most soldiers I've known." Hashem smiled, but there was a sadness behind it. Amira is special. She has known much hardship in her young life. Her mother died in childbirth, and her father was killed by insurgents 2 years ago. She lives with my family now. We are the only family she has left. Marcus felt the words hit him like a physical blow. Orphaned. The little girl who had guided them through the darkness, who had warned them about the door, who had helped them save dozens of lives, was an orphan with no one in the world except this village. "She told me her family was in that building," Marcus said, confused. "She said her mother, father, and brother were being held hostage." Hashem's expression grew more somber. "In our culture, the village is family. Every man is a father, every woman a mother. When she said her family was in danger, she meant all of us." Marcus looked across the camp and found Amira sitting with a group of other children. Despite everything she had been through, she was laughing at something one of the other children had said, her face bright with the resilience that only youth could provide. "What will happen to her now?" he asked. "The same as before. She will stay with us, be raised as one of our own. But life in this village is hard, Sergeant, and after what has happened I fear it will only become harder. The men who attacked us, they will not forget. They will come back." Marcus knew the elder was right. Hayes had escaped, which meant the threat remained, and the village, having defied the insurgents, would be a target for retaliation. "We'll report what happened here," Marcus said. "Command will send additional forces, establish a presence in the area. You won't be left unprotected." Hashem nodded, but his eyes told a different story. He had seen too many promises from foreign powers, too many assurances that proved hollow when the moment of truth arrived. He believed in actions, not words. "We shall see," was all he said. The evacuation helicopters arrived 3 hours later, descending from the sky like giant metal birds. Jimmy was loaded onto the first helicopter, his condition stable but serious. He would need extensive surgery and rehabilitation, but the doctors were optimistic that he would walk again. As the rest of the team prepared to board, Marcus found himself hesitating. He looked back at the village, at the group of children playing in the morning sun, at one little girl in particular who had made such an impression on him. "Sergeant?" Derek appeared at his side. "We need to go." "I know, I can't stop thinking about her, about all of them. We saved them today, but what about tomorrow? What about next week?" Derek sighed, understanding in his eyes. "We did what we could. We can't save everyone, Marcus, you know that." "Maybe not, but maybe we can do more than we think." Marcus walked back toward the camp, toward where Amira was sitting with the other children. She looked up as he approached, and her face broke into a smile that seemed to light up the entire world. "You are leaving," she said. "It wasn't a question." "I have to. There are people waiting for me back home." Amira nodded, accepting this with the same quiet dignity she had displayed throughout their ordeal. "Will you come back?" Marcus knelt down to her level, just as he had done so many times over the past 24 hours. "I don't know. The army sends us where we're needed, and we don't always get to choose." "Then this is goodbye." "Maybe. Or maybe it's just until we meet again. You never know what the future holds, Amira. That's the thing about life. It has a way of surprising us." Amira reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out something small and worn. She pressed it into Marcus's hand, her fingers warm against his calloused palm. "My mother gave this to me before she died. She said it would protect me, but I think you need it more than I do." Marcus looked at the object in his hand. It was a small stone, polished smooth by years of handling, with a natural hole through the center. Nothing magical, nothing supernatural, just a simple stone that had meant the world to a dying mother and her daughter. "I can't accept this, Amira. It's all you have left of her. That is why I am giving it to you, so you will remember me, and maybe someday you will come back." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for years beginning to thaw. He closed his fingers around the stone and held it tight. "I'll remember you," he promised, "and I will come back. I don't know when, but I will." Amira smiled, and for a moment Marcus could see the woman she would one day become. Strong, compassionate, resilient, a survivor. "I believe you," she said. He stood and walked back toward the waiting helicopter, the stone clutched in his hand. Derek was waiting for him, a knowing look on his face. "Making promises you can't keep, Sergeant." Marcus looked at the stone one last time before tucking it safely into his pocket. "Maybe, or maybe it's time I started keeping the promises I make." The helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from the village and the horrors and triumphs of the past 24 hours. Marcus watched through the window as the landscape grew smaller and smaller, until the village was just a dot among the mountains and valleys of Afghanistan. But even as the distance grew, he could still feel the weight of that small stone in his pocket, and he could still hear Amira's voice in his mind, warning him not to open that door. She'd been right, of course. The door had been dangerous, but it wasn't the door to the room with the bomb that she had truly been warning him about. It was the door to his own heart, the one he had kept locked and guarded for so many years, the one that had finally begun to open in the presence of a brave little girl from a village at the edge of the world. The weeks that followed were a blur of debriefings and investigations. Command wanted to know everything about Richard Hayes, about the mysterious American who had been working with the insurgents. But despite their best efforts, they found nothing. It was as if the man had never existed, a ghost who had appeared and disappeared without leaving a trace. Jimmy recovered slowly but steadily. The damage to his spine had been less severe than initially feared, and with intensive physical therapy, he was able to walk again within 3 months. He never returned to active duty, but he found a new purpose training the next generation of soldiers, passing on the skills and knowledge that had kept him alive through so many battles. Derek, Antonio, Michael, and David all continued to serve, each of them carrying the memories of that night in different ways. They didn't talk about it often, but there was a bond between them that went beyond words, a shared experience that had changed each of them in ways they were still discovering. And Marcus found himself thinking about Amira more and more as the days passed. He thought about her bravery, her resilience, her capacity for hope in the midst of unimaginable darkness. He thought about the stone in his pocket, worn smooth by a mother's love, passed from daughter to stranger in an act of trust that still amazed him. 6 months after the mission, Marcus received a letter. It was written in careful English, the handwriting of a child who was still learning, and it bore a return address that he recognized immediately. Dear Sergeant Thompson, I hope this letter finds you well. The village is rebuilding. Your army sent people to help us, just as you promised they would. We have new houses and a new school. I am learning to read and write in English so that I can write to you properly. The other children call me brave because of what I did during the attack. I tell them that you were the brave one, you and your friends. You came into danger to help people you had never met. That is the bravest thing I can imagine. I still think about that night. Sometimes I have bad dreams about the door with the red paint, but then I remember that you came to help, and the dreams are not so scary anymore. Elder Hashem says that the men who attacked us are gone now. Your army found them and stopped them. We are safe, at least for now. I want to ask you something, but I'm afraid it is too much to ask. Elder Hashem says that I must be patient, that I cannot expect too much from people who live far away, but I cannot help hoping. Do you remember your promise? Do you still have my mother's stone? I wait for your answer. Your friend, Amira? Marcus read the letter 3 times, each time feeling the words sink deeper into his heart. A child, half a world away, was waiting for him, believing in him, trusting that he would keep his word. He sat down at his desk and began to write. Dear Amira, I was so happy to receive your letter. Your English is very good, and I can tell you are working hard in school. Your mother would be proud of you. I do remember my promise, and I still have your mother's stone. I carry it with me every day in my pocket close to my heart. When I feel afraid or alone, I hold it and think of you, and I feel brave again. I have news that I hope will make you happy. I have applied for a special assignment, one that will bring me back to your region. If all goes well, I will be there within the next few months. It is not a guarantee, but it is a hope. And sometimes hope is all we need. Keep learning, keep growing, keep being the brave young woman I know you are. The world needs people like you, Amira, people who face their fears and help others do the same. Until we meet again. Your friend, Marcus. He sealed the letter and sent it, and then he waited, waited for the assignment to be approved, waited for the orders to come through, waited for the chance to fulfill a promise he had made to a little girl on the worst and best night of his life. 3 months later, Marcus stepped off a helicopter in Kunar province. The landscape was familiar, the mountains rising up around him like old friends, the dust and diesel smell filling his lungs with memories both painful and precious. The village had changed since his last visit. The damage from the attack had been repaired, the buildings rebuilt stronger than before. There was a new school, just as Amira had written, and the sound of children's laughter echoed through the streets. He walked through the village, past the curious glances of residents who were trying to place his face. He walked past the building that had once held the hostages, past the spot where the red door had stood, past the memories that lived in every stone and shadow. And then he saw her. Amira was standing in front of the school, surrounded by other children. She had grown in the months since he had last seen her, taller and stronger, but her eyes were the same. Those impossibly large, impossibly wise eyes that had seen too much, but still held room for hope. She saw him at almost the same moment he saw her. For a long heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Amira broke into a run, racing across the dusty ground toward him, her arms outstretched. Marcus caught her as she leaped, holding her tight against his chest, feeling the tears that he hadn't even realized he was crying wet against his cheeks. "You came back," she whispered. "You kept your promise." "I told you I would," he whispered back. "I told you I'd remember." He set her down, and she looked up at him with a smile that seemed to make the whole world brighter. "Do you still have it? My mother's stone?" Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, worn stone with the hole through the center. Amira's eyes went wide, and she touched it gently, reverently. "You really kept it?" "Of course I did. It's the most precious thing anyone's ever given me." Amira shook her head, taking the stone from his hand and pressing it back into his. "No, it is yours now. My mother's spirit lives in that stone, and now it protects you. That is what she would have wanted." Marcus closed his fingers around the stone, feeling its weight and warmth. "Then I'll carry it for the rest of my life." They walked together through the village, Amira introducing him to everyone they passed. "This was the soldier who saved us," she told them proudly. "This is my friend from America." He kept his promise. Elder Hashem greeted him with the same quiet dignity he remembered. "Sergeant Thompson, it is good to see you again." "It's good to be back. Your village has recovered well." "Thanks in no small part to you and your men. We owe you a debt that cannot be repaid." Marcus shook his head. "There is no debt. We were just doing our job." "No." Hashem's eyes were serious. "What you did was more than duty. You risked your lives for strangers. You showed mercy to our children, kindness to our elders. That is not duty. That is something far greater." Marcus didn't know what to say. He was a soldier, trained to fight and kill and survive. Mercy and kindness were not words that usually appeared in his job description. But looking around at the village, at the faces of the people he had helped save, he began to understand what Hashem meant. "I'm here for 6 months," Marcus said. "Special assignment, helping to train the local security forces. I thought, if it's acceptable to you, I might spend some of my free time here, with Amira, with all of you." Hashem's weathered face broke into a smile. "You are always welcome here, Sergeant, as family." Family. The word struck a chord deep within Marcus's chest. He had spent so many years running from the concept, burying himself in work and duty to avoid the pain of connection. But standing here, in this place that had been through so much, surrounded by people who had lost everything and rebuilt from nothing, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like he belonged. The months that followed were among the happiest of Marcus's life. He spent his days training the local security forces, teaching them the skills they would need to protect their village and their families. And he spent his evenings with Amira and the other children playing games, helping with homework, becoming the father figure that so many of them desperately needed. Amira blossomed under his attention. Her English improved rapidly, and she proved to be quick-witted and insightful beyond her years. She asked endless questions about America, about his life, about everything she could think of, and Marcus answered them all, surprised to find that he enjoyed sharing pieces of himself that he had kept hidden for so long. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and gold, Amira asked a question that caught him off guard. "Sergeant Marcus, do you have a family back in America?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I have a mother and a father, a sister and 2 brothers, but I haven't seen them in a very long time." "Why not?" He sighed, searching for words that would make sense to a child. "When I joined the army, I thought I had to leave everything behind. I thought that caring about people would make me weak, that it would keep me from doing my job. So I pushed everyone away. My family, my friends, everyone. But that sounds lonely." "It was. It is. But I told myself it was necessary, that it was the price I had to pay to be the soldier I needed to be." Amira was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. "I think you were wrong," she said finally. "Oh, how so?" "You care about the men on your team, about Sergeant Derek and Corporal Jimmy and all the others. You care about me and Elder Hashem and the village. Caring about people does not make you weak. It makes you brave." Marcus looked at her, this child who had taught him more about courage and hope than any of his years of training. "When did you become so wise?" Amira grinned. "I have always been wise. You are only now noticing." He laughed, a genuine laugh that seemed to shake loose something that had been stuck inside him for years. "You're right. You're absolutely right." That night, for the first time in nearly a decade, Marcus called his mother. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice confused and hopeful all at once. "Hello?" "Mom, it's Marcus." There was a long pause. "Marcus, is that really you?" "It's really me, Mom. I'm sorry it's been so long. I'm sorry for a lot of things." He could hear her crying on the other end of the line, tears of joy and relief and years of worry finally released. "Oh, honey, I don't care about any of that. I'm just so glad to hear your voice." They talked for hours, catching up on years of missed birthdays and holidays, and ordinary days that had somehow slipped by unnoticed. His mother told him about his father's retirement, his sister's wedding, his brother's children that he had never met. And Marcus told her about his life, about the missions and the medals and the things he wasn't allowed to talk about, but carried with him always. And he told her about Amira. "She sounds like a very special little girl," his mother said. "She is. Mom, she's the reason I called. She made me realize what I was missing, what I had thrown away. Then I think I owe her a thank you. When do we get to meet her?" Marcus paused, a wild idea forming in his mind. "Actually, Mom, there's something I've been thinking about, something I want to talk to you and Dad about." "What is it?" "It's complicated, and it might sound crazy, but I want to adopt her. I want to bring Amira home." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment Marcus feared he had gone too far, asked too much. But then his mother spoke, her voice filled with a warmth that transcended the distance between them. "Tell me everything." The adoption process was long and complicated, tangled up in international law and military regulations, and a bureaucracy that seemed designed to frustrate anyone who tried to navigate it. But Marcus was nothing if not persistent, and he had help from unexpected quarters. Elder Hashem supported the adoption without hesitation. "Amira has a good heart and a bright mind. She deserves every opportunity to grow and learn and become the person she is meant to be. With you, she will have that chance." Derek, Antonio, Michael, and David all wrote letters of support, testifying to Marcus's character and his bond with the little girl. Jimmy, recovered enough to walk with a cane but still months away from running, sent a video message that made Amira laugh until tears streamed down her cheeks. "Hey, kiddo, I hear you're getting a new dad. I just want you to know that Marcus is one of the best men I've ever known. He'll take care of you, and if he doesn't, you call me and I'll come kick his butt. I mean it. I may be walking with a cane, but I can still throw a punch." Even Command got involved, pulling strings and expediting paperwork that would normally have taken years to process. "You saved a lot of lives in that village, Sergeant," the colonel said during one of their meetings. "The least we can do is help you build a new one." Amira approached the situation with the same quiet strength she had shown throughout their time together. She understood what was happening, what it would mean to leave the only home she had ever known, and she was scared, naturally, but she was also excited, eager for the adventure that awaited her. "Will I have to learn a new language?" she asked one day. "In America?" Marcus smiled. "Your English is already better than a lot of Americans I know, but yes, you'll have to learn some new things, new customs, new foods, new ways of doing things. Will I still be able to talk to Elder Hashem and the other children?" "Of course. We'll call them, write letters, send pictures, and maybe someday, when you're older, we can come back to visit." Amira nodded, processing this information with her characteristic seriousness. "And what should I call you when we are in America?" Marcus had been thinking about this question for weeks, turning it over in his mind, unsure of what he hoped the answer would be. "You can call me whatever feels right to you, Marcus or Sergeant or anything else." Amira was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the mountains in the distance. Then, slowly, she turned to look at him, and there was something in her gaze that made his heart ache. "Can I call you Papa?" Marcus felt the tears spring to his eyes before he could stop them. He knelt down and took Amira's hands in his own, looking into the face of the little girl who had changed his life. "I would be honored if you called me Papa." Amira threw her arms around his neck and held on tight, and Marcus held her back, and in that moment, standing on the dusty ground of a village at the edge of the world, a new family was born. The day they left Afghanistan was bittersweet. The entire village came out to see them off, pressing gifts and good wishes upon them until Marcus could barely carry everything. Elder Hashem embraced them both, his eyes wet with tears. "You will always have a home here," he said. "No matter where you go, no matter what happens, this village will always be yours." Amira hugged every child, every adult, every person who had been a part of her life for as long as she could remember. She was crying, but she was smiling too, and Marcus could see the courage that had impressed him from the very beginning shining through. "I will write to you," she promised, "and I will come back someday. I will bring Papa with me, and we will see the mountains again." They boarded the helicopter together, father and daughter, bound for a new life in a new land. As the aircraft lifted off, Amira pressed her face to the window, watching her village grow smaller and smaller until it was just a speck among the vast landscape of Afghanistan. Then she turned to Marcus and smiled. "I am ready for my adventure now, Papa." Marcus squeezed her hand. "So am I, sweetheart, so am I." The flight to America was long, but Amira remained awake for most of it, her eyes wide with wonder at everything she saw. She asked endless questions about the clouds, the ocean, the cities that glittered like jewels in the darkness below. And Marcus answered them all, seeing the world through her eyes, rediscovering wonder in things he had long taken for granted. They landed in Atlanta on a sunny March afternoon, and Marcus's entire family was waiting at the airport. His mother was first, rushing forward to embrace them both with the fierce love that only a mother could possess. "Welcome home," she whispered to Amira. "Welcome to our family." His father hung back at first, unsure and awkward, but Amira walked straight up to him and extended her hand. "I am Amira," she said. "I am happy to meet you." His father's weathered face softened, and he shook her hand with the same formality she had offered. "I am John, and I'm very happy to meet you too." Marcus's sister and brothers crowded around, introducing themselves and their children, filling the air with noise and laughter and the chaos of a large family reunited. And in the middle of it all, Amira stood with a smile on her face, absorbing everything, becoming a part of something she had never had before. Home. The adjustment was not easy. There were language barriers and cultural differences, homesickness and moments of fear. Amira had nightmares about the attack, about the men with guns, about the door she had warned them not to open. And Marcus held her through each one, whispering reassurances, promising her that she was safe now, that no one would ever hurt her again. But there were good moments too. There was the first time Amira tasted ice cream and declared it the greatest invention in the history of the world. There was the first day of school, when she walked in scared and uncertain and walked out with 3 new friends. There was the first Christmas, when she helped decorate the tree and sang carols in her still accented English and opened presents with the kind of joy that only children can experience. And there was the first time she called him Papa in front of someone else. They were at the grocery store, navigating the overwhelming aisles of an American supermarket, when a woman approached them with a curious expression. "What a beautiful little girl," the woman said. "Is she yours?" Amira looked up at Marcus, her eyes meeting his, with a question and an answer, and everything in between. "Yes," Marcus said, his voice steady. "She is my daughter." Amira beamed, wrapping her arms around his waist. "And he is my papa, the bravest man in the world." The woman smiled and moved on, and Marcus stood there in the middle of the grocery store, holding his daughter, feeling the stone in his pocket and the weight of all the choices that had led him to this moment. He had spent his whole life running from connection, from love, from the vulnerability that comes with caring about another human being. He had built walls around his heart and told himself they were necessary, that they made him stronger. But they hadn't made him stronger, they had only made him alone. It took a little girl from a village in Afghanistan, a little girl who had warned him not to open a door, to show him what he had been missing, to show him that the greatest courage is not in facing danger, but in opening your heart to someone else, in taking the risk of love, with all its pain and joy and uncertainty. "Don't open that door," she had said, and he had listened. He had not opened the door to the room with the bomb, but he had opened another door, the door to his own heart, and what he had found inside had changed his life forever. Amira was 15 when she wrote her first story. It was a simple tale, a few pages about a soldier and a little girl who saved each other. She showed it to Marcus nervously, unsure of what he would think. He read it 3 times, tears streaming down his face. "This is beautiful," he told her. "You have a gift." Amira blushed. "It is just words. It is not brave like what you did." "Courage comes in many forms, sweetheart. Sometimes it's facing guns and explosions. Sometimes it's sharing your heart with the world." He tapped the pages in his hand. "This takes courage, more than you know." Amira went on to study journalism in college, determined to tell stories that mattered, to give voice to those who had none. She graduated top of her class and got a job with a major news network, covering conflicts and crises around the world. And wherever she went, whatever dangers she faced, she carried 2 things with her press credentials and a small worn stone with a hole through the center. Marcus retired from the army the year Amira graduated. He bought a small house in Georgia, not far from where his parents lived, and spent his days gardening and reading and waiting for his daughter's phone calls. Derek came to visit often, bringing his grandchildren to play in Marcus's backyard. Antonio had passed away a few years earlier, but the remaining team members stayed in touch, bound together by experiences that no one else could understand. Jimmy walked with a limp now, but he walked. He taught a self-defense class at the local YMCA and spent his weekends fishing at the lake. Michael had opened a free clinic in the city, providing medical care to those who couldn't afford it. And David, still a man of few words, had become a wilderness guide in Montana, leading tours into the same mountains where he had learned to hunt as a boy. They were all different people now, shaped by the years and the experiences that had brought them to this point. But they were still brothers, still a team, still connected by something that transcended time and distance. One evening, when Marcus was 72 years old, he sat on his porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, reminiscent of another sunset in another country, what felt like a lifetime ago. Amira sat beside him, no longer a little girl, but a woman in her 30s, successful and confident and beautiful. She had just returned from a long assignment overseas, and the lines on her face told stories of their own. "Do you ever regret it, Papa?" she asked softly. "Taking me in, leaving the army, all of it?" Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the stone, worn smooth by decades of handling. He turned it over in his fingers, feeling its weight and warmth. "Not for a single moment," he said. "You saved my life that night, Amira. Not from the bomb or the bullets, but from something worse. You saved me from myself, from the person I was becoming." Amira leaned her head against his shoulder. "You saved me too, you know. You gave me a family, a future, a chance to become something more than a scared little girl in a village nobody had ever heard of. We saved each other then. That's what families do." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the colors fade from the sky. And as the stars began to emerge overhead, Marcus felt a peace settle over him that he had never known was possible. He had spent so much of his life preparing for death, training for combat, steeling himself against the losses that were inevitable in his profession. But here, on this quiet porch with his daughter beside him, he realized that he had been preparing for the wrong thing all along. The real battle wasn't against enemies with guns and bombs. The real battle was against fear, against isolation, against the walls we build around our hearts to protect ourselves from pain. And the only way to win that battle was to open those doors, to let people in, to take the risk of loving and being loved in return. "Don't open that door," Amira had warned him all those years ago, and she had been right about the literal door, the one that led to danger and death. But she had also, unwittingly, been wrong, because there was another door, the door to his heart, and opening that door was the bravest thing Marcus Thompson had ever done. And what he found inside had changed everything. In the years that followed, Marcus often thought about that night in the village, about the hostages they had saved, the enemy they had defeated, the mysterious man named Hayes, who had escaped into the darkness. The investigation had never yielded answers about who Hayes really was, or who he had been working for. Those questions remained perhaps forever unanswered. But other questions had found their answers. Questions about meaning and purpose, about love and family, about what it meant to live a life worth living. Those answers had come not from intelligence reports or military briefings, but from a little girl with impossibly large eyes who had trusted him to do the right thing. Amira married when she was 35, a fellow journalist she had met covering a story in the Middle East. Marcus walked her down the aisle, wearing his dress uniform for the first time in years, his chest heavy with medals and his heart heavy with emotion. "Thank you, Papa," Amira whispered as they stood at the altar, "for everything, for keeping your promise, for giving me a life." "Thank you for teaching me how to live it," he whispered back. She had 2 children, a boy and a girl, who called Marcus Grandpa and demanded stories about his adventures every time they visited. He told them tales of bravery and heroism, of good versus evil, of soldiers who protected the innocent. But his favorite story to tell was about a little girl who had warned them not to open a door, a little girl who had saved a village and, in the process, saved a broken soldier's soul. A little girl who had grown into a woman, a mother, a journalist, and who still carried her mother's stone with her wherever she went. "Is the story true, Grandpa?" his granddaughter asked one day, her eyes wide with wonder. Marcus looked at Amira, who was watching from across the room with a smile on her face. He thought about everything that had happened since that night, all the joy and sorrow and love and growth that had filled the years between then and now. "Every word," he said, "every single word." The little girl nodded, satisfied. "Tell it again." And so he did. He told it again and again, as many times as they asked, because some stories deserved to be told. Stories about courage and hope, about second chances and new beginnings, about the doors we choose to open and the ones we leave closed. "Don't open that door," Amira had said on that dark night so many years ago, and Marcus had listened. But he had opened another door, one that led to a life he never knew he wanted, with a daughter he never expected to have, and a love that transformed everything it touched. That was the real story, not the mission or the medals or the battles won and lost. The real story was about two broken people who found each other in the darkness and helped each other find the light. And that story, unlike the war that brought them together, had no end. It continued every day, in every conversation, in every shared memory, in every moment of love passed from generation to generation. "Don't open that door," the little girl had said. "But open your heart," she had shown him. And what he found inside changed his life forever. Marcus Thompson passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, surrounded by his family. Amira was holding his hand when he took his last breath, the stone pressed between their palms, the circle finally complete. At his funeral, she gave a eulogy that brought everyone to tears. She spoke about his courage and his kindness, his stubbornness and his humor, his transformation from a distant soldier to a devoted father. She spoke about the night they met, about the warning she had given him, about the door that changed everything. "My father used to say that courage was about facing your fears," she told the gathered mourners, "but he learned, as I did, that the greatest courage is not in what we fight against, but in what we open ourselves to. Love, family, connection, vulnerability, these things take more bravery than any battle." She held up the stone, worn smooth by 3 generations of hands. "My mother gave this to me before she died. I gave it to my father on the night we met. He carried it for the rest of his life, and now I carry it again. It is a reminder that the things that protect us are not always walls and weapons. Sometimes they are simply the people we choose to love." She paused, looking out at the faces of her family, her father's brothers in arms, all the lives that had been touched by one man's decision to open his heart. "Don't open that door," I told him all those years ago, and he listened, but he opened another door, one that led to me, to us, to this moment, and I am forever grateful that he was brave enough to turn that handle. After the service, Amira walked alone to her father's grave. She knelt in the grass and pressed her hand against the fresh earth, feeling the connection that transcended life and death. "I love you, Papa," she whispered. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for opening the door." She stayed there for a long time, watching the sun set over the cemetery, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Just like that other sunset, in that other place, what felt like a lifetime ago. And as the stars began to emerge overhead, Amira could swear she heard her father's voice, carried on the wind, speaking the words that had defined their lives together. "I told you I'd remember, and I did, every single day." She smiled through her tears and touched the stone in her pocket, Some doors, once opened, can never be closed, and some loves, once found, never truly end. They just transform, from one life to the next, from one generation to the next, an unbroken chain of hope and courage and redemption. "Don't open that door," the little girl had said. But thank God Marcus Thompson had opened his heart instead. And what he found inside changed everything forever.